Letterboxd is a website that I've been using religiously now since 2020. In fact, if you manage to find my account, you'll notice that I've been logging or journaling every film I've ever watched since I made that account. However, I don't really review movies on there because Letterboxd reviews are absolute garbage. Most of the time, it's a lame one-liner review or some outdated meme that is completely useless in determining whether or not the film is even worth your time. So I decided to go through some of the worst Godzilla reviews that I could possibly find on Letterboxd and have some fun with these awful takes. Obviously, there's nothing wrong with not liking a specific movie. If someone dislikes or downright hates a movie that I love, then that's okay. These reviews, however, are hilariously bad. It's like some people are trying to write the most obscure, nonsensical things they can without actually saying anything about the film itself. Mind you, I will be blurring out the usernames and the profile pictures since I don't want this to be a witch hunt or a harassment campaign. That's not the point of any of this. So depressing to watch. We're finally here at the current moment of Godzilla media, and it's a cowardly revision of Japan's own crimes during World War II. Minus One can't even make this point proudly. Its bland, inert cinematography endangers a sense of painful self-seriousness. Its melodrama attempts to paper over any cracks in its ideology. Minus One is a series of impossibilities, climaxing in a kamikaze pilot doing a kamikaze attack that he survives. The film tries to argue that the war was bad, but wasn't there something beautiful about it? Wasn't the Zero plane cool? Didn't kamikaze attacks represent a sacrifice for the greater good? Of course not. Catharsis weaponized to manufacture consent. Look at this man with PTSD. Don't you feel bad for him? You're looking at someone that fought in tandem with the bad German people from 1940. Google Imperial Japan's war crimes. I actually don't have a responsibility to give a shit about this veteran, especially in the context of finishing the war. The degree to which Japan's current blockbuster industry churns out these sublimated odes towards fascism is deeply concerning. We should have let the big guy rest 30 years ago. The reviewer claims that Godzilla Minus One is a cowardly revision of Japan's own crimes during World War II, but Godzilla Minus One does not glorify or revise Japan's role in the war. Rather, it acknowledges the immense toll the war took on the Japanese people, while also reflecting the collective trauma of the post-war period. The film focuses on how individuals, especially veterans with PTSD, grapple with the aftermath of war and the consequences of their participation, not to glorify it, but to explore the personal cost of conflict. The review hyper focuses on the kamikaze pilot's survival as an impossibility, but this was set up earlier in the movie by showing that he has an ejection seat. In fact, the survival of the protagonist as it occurs in the climax is not about glorifying the act of kamikaze, but illustrating how the character, burdened by guilt, finds a way to redeem himself and to essentially tear down that original concept of sacrificing yourself for the country. The film does not present the act as a heroic ideal, but as a reflection of desperation and personal sacrifice. It's a nuanced portrayal meant to show the contrast with the mindless sacrifice of war, not to celebrate it. This is a reviewer with zero media literacy that had no idea what they were even watching and just assumed, protagonist was a World War II veteran that fought for Japan. They must be the good guy, and therefore, this film is pro-Japan during World War II. That is such one-dimensional, surface-level film analysis, ugh. The criticism that the film has bland, inert cinematography also just misses the fact that Minus One adopts a solemn tone to reflect post-war devastation and the internal struggles of the characters. This painful self-seriousness that they describe is all deliberate. It isn't about bombastic kaiju battles, but a character-driven narrative about survival, grief, and reckoning with guilt. The cinematography, with its muted approach, complements the heavy emotional weight of the story. The review also accuses Minus One of being an ode to fascism or weaponizing catharsis to manufacture consent, but this interpretation overlooks the fact that these films do not shy away from showing the trauma of the war on Japanese citizens, mainly veterans as well. It never suggests that war was beautiful. Instead, the film critiques the ideological sacrifice demanded by Imperial Japan, while focusing on the personal struggle to find humanity and redemption after being a part of it. It is very anti-fascist in that sense. The protagonist's PTSD and survivor's guilt serve as a clear condemnation of war, not an attempt to sanitize it. The review also attacks the film for centering on a veteran and suggesting that the audience should feel bad for him. But Godzilla Minus One uses the veteran's story to humanize the impact of the war without excusing the actions of the Imperial Japanese military. This same person must have wanted Oppenheimer to suddenly just cut to a scene in Japan where we see Japanese people talk about what's going on with Oppenheimer, because that would not work at all with what the movie was trying to do. Same here with Minus One. We didn't need a 20-minute long scene going, hey guys, war crimes are bad. Trust me, this review's aggressive stance on Japan's war crimes are valid in a broader historical sense, but it does not align with what the film is trying to do. Like many Godzilla films, Minus One uses the monster as a metaphor for overwhelming forces. In this case, the existential fear, guilt, and devastation that Japan faced post-World War II. Criticizing the film for failing to condemn Japan's war crimes just misses the entire point of the movie and its allegorical nature. The big guy isn't just a monster. He's a symbol of the consequences of war and the destruction left in its wake. With this movie in a different language, I didn't like watching it since I had to watch the subtitles. I couldn't understand what each scene was going for. This movie was very boring and wasn't entertaining. I didn't like how Godzilla looked so fake and unrealistic. Also, the actors did a bad job acting, especially when they were scared.
さて、これは私の最大の不満の一つです。それは字幕付きの映画を見ることができないことです。あなたは真剣に自分自身とあなたの世界観を制限しています。あなたの言語で話されている映画だけを見ることによって、敬意を表して大きな男の子のズボンを履いて、それに対処してください。
Going back to the review itself, the reviewer is complaining about having to watch a film with subtitles, but again, that doesn't detract from the film's quality. The film's themes, especially its allegory for nuclear devastation, transcend language. Watching foreign films with subtitles is about experiencing another culture's storytelling, not just its dialogue. While the reviewer claims that Godzilla looks fake and unrealistic, it's important to understand that this was made in 1954. The Godzilla suit was a groundbreaking special effect. The aesthetic may not compare to modern CGI, but for its time, it was extremely impressive. Not to mention the acting isn't meant to be over the top, but more subtle and reflective of collective trauma. Characters' reactions mirror how real people might respond to the incomprehensible power and destruction that Godzilla represents. In fact, I would argue that the acting is very naturalistic compared to other science fiction films from the 1950s. Absolutely refusing to engage with the human element of these movies. I literally only look at the screen when the monsters are on screen. Don't even read the subtitles. I already went over my issue with their takes on subtitles, but in Mothra vs. Godzilla, the human characters drive the narrative by representing the moral and ethical dilemmas that are central to the film. The greedy businessmen, scientists, and reporters provide a contrast to the purity and protectiveness of Mothra. Ignoring the human scenes means that you are missing out on the film's core themes of nature versus capitalism and humanity's responsibility toward the environment. The monsters don't just appear randomly, they are linked to human actions and consequences. Wasting my time even turning this movie on. There's barely any Godzilla in the first hour of the movie. There are 500 characters and none of them are interesting or matter. I can't believe how much this movie is praised considering it only has a single cool scene that is followed up by a half hour of meetings. Motherfuckers who sit through this movie must stroke their shit to filing paperwork because this movie is straight up boring. Purple breath scenes were cool, but then what happens? The stiffest rendition of Godzilla shoots lasers out of random parts of his body. Like, actually fuck off. The fact that Godzilla doesn't dominate the first hour of this movie isn't a flaw, it's a very deliberate choice. Shin Godzilla isn't a typical monster action film, it's a political satire and disaster movie that critiques government inefficiency in times of crisis. The buildup is meant to mirror the slow bureaucratic response to a disaster, with the looming presence of Godzilla symbolizing the unstoppable force of nature. The tension in the first hour sets up the eventual payoff when Godzilla's destruction becomes even more shocking due to the delayed response. While the reviewer complains about 500 characters, this is part of the film's satirical critique of Japanese bureaucracy. Shin Godzilla highlights how many layers of government, military, and scientific departments must coordinate or fail to in responding to a crisis. The overwhelming numbers of characters is a reflection of this chaotic and ineffective system. It's not just filler. The fact that the characters may seem unremarkable is the point. They represent ordinary people caught in extraordinary circumstances rather than the traditional heroic archetypes seen in other Godzilla films. We aren't getting Ford Brody here, we are getting Japanese bureaucrat number 421. And that's the whole point of the movie. If you want to see a Ford Brody type, watch Godzilla 2014. Well, that about wraps it up. Trust me, there's a lot more of these to go through, so if you guys want a part 2, let me know down below in the comments. Just don't go out of your way and harass these people. I blurred their names and profile pictures for a reason. Yes, they posted these publicly, but still, leave them alone. Anyways, I'm Cole McCormick. You're watching Firewood Media, and I just wanted to say thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.